Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you've ever had an app just freeze on you or a website go down, you've seen what happens when a complex system fails.
Hmm.
We tend to forget that these huge computing systems, the ones running, I don't know, banking,
Hmm.
all our communications, they don't actually run themselves.
Not at all.
And as the old operations folks used to say, probably at 3 in the morning, hope is not a strategy.
Precisely. And hope is a really, really poor strategy when a crisis is costing your company millions of dollars a minute.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really dig into the evolution of how we manage these massive systems. We're tracing this huge philosophical shift from the old way of doing things all the way to what's coming next.
Okay.
We'll start with that traditional sysadmin model, then move into site reliability engineering, or SRE, which Google pioneered, and then look ahead to this emerging world of AI native engineering.
All right, let's unpack that. So we're starting way back with the traditional sysadmin model. This is where you had system administrators, and their job was basically, what, to care for and feed the software.
That's a great way to put it. They deployed the code that developers wrote, and then they were completely on the hook for keeping it running.
Now it couldn't last.
No, it was fundamentally unsustainable. It had this huge direct cost problem. As the service got more complex, or as traffic grew, the number of alerts, manual fixes, all of that, it just scaled up right along with it.
So more complexity meant you had to hire more people.
Exactly. The size of your ops team had to grow at the same rate just to, keep the lights on. It was a
Right.
guaranteed cost spiral.
But the sources we looked at, they really emphasized that the direct costs, that wasn't even the worst part. It was the cultural damage. They call it trench warfare.
That phrase is perfect. It just perfectly captures the conflict because you have developers who are rewarded for one thing, launching features fast.
They want velocity.
They want velocity. And then you have the ops teams who are rewarded for stability. Their goal is making sure the pager never, ever goes off. And since most outages come from a change,
Their goals are in direct opposition.
completely. And you can just picture the tension, right? The ops team, they've been burned before, so they create these incredibly rigid launch gates. They're checking for every single problem that ever caused an outage in the past.
Which makes the checklist impossibly long.
And slow. And so the developers, what do? They learn to get around it. They start pushing updates through back channels. Instead of a big launch, it's a subtle flag flip or an incremental update.
Something that can fly under the radar.
Exactly. Something that bypasses that whole painful review process. So now you have everyone gaming the system, stability is at risk, and nobody trusts each other.
So something had to give. And that something was site reliability engineering. What was the core idea from Benjamin Traynor Sloss at Google?
The premise was actually incredibly simple, but it reframed the entire conversation. It was just, what happens if you ask a software engineer to design an operations team?
Wow.
You immediately start seeing operational problems, not as manual work, but as software problems that can be solved with code.
And you can see that reflected in who they hired for these SRE teams, right? They weren't just networking experts, they were coders first.
Absolutely. The sources say an SRE team is 50 to 60% actual software engineers. The rest are, people with deep technical skills like UNIX internals or networking, but who also have to have a really strong aptitude for coding.
So the philosophy is, don't just do the task, write software to do the task for you.
Yes, and the goal is to build systems that are automatic, not just automated. It's a subtle but really important distinction.
That distinction is key because it leads us right into the core SRE principles that stop that trench warfare. And it all starts with this rule about manual labor, the toil threshold.
This is, I think, maybe the most impactful reform in modern operations. Google puts a hard, non-negotiable 50% cap on what they call ops work for all SREs.
And ops work is
Right.
tickets, on-call stuff.
It's what they call toil. It's manual, it's repetitive, it's tactical. It's work that doesn't require creative engineering thought. So yes, tickets, manual run books, on-call duties.
Which means the other 50% of their time has to be spent on durable engineering work.
Right. Building automation, improving the architecture, essentially engineering their own jobs away.
But the rule is one thing. The enforcement is what sounds like pure genius.
It is, because if that operational load, that toil, goes over the 50% mark, the excess work gets shifted right back to the development team that wrote the unstable code.
So suddenly, the developers are the ones holding the pager.
Suddenly, they're the ones getting woken up at 3 a.m.
Wow. Okay, so you're telling the listener that if they build a system that's flaky, well, they get to deal with the consequences themselves.
It creates this incredibly powerful, immediate feedback mechanism.
Yeah.
It forces developers to think about stability from day one because they are now the primary consumers of their own system's instability. The pain goes right back to the source.
Okay, so that's the first pillar. The second one, and maybe the most famous, is the error budget. This seems to be the thing that directly solves that dev versus ops conflict.
It does, because it introduces a shared currency for risk. And it starts with this really profound idea. 100% availability is the wrong reliability target for basically everything.
Except maybe like a pacemaker or something?
Exactly. Pacemakers, anti-lock brakes. Sure. But for a web service, striving for 100% is a waste. The user's experience is already limited by their Wi-Fi, their cell provider, the global DNS.
So the tiny gain from, say, 99.99% to 99.999 is invisible to the user, but incredibly expensive for the company.
Extremely expensive. So the availability target becomes a product question, not a technical one. What level of reliability makes our users happy?
Right. And once you have that target, say 99.99%, the error budget is just the leftover part.
It's just a remainder. That 0.01% is your budget for downtime, for failures. And the cultural shift is huge. The goal isn't zero outages anymore. The goal is to strategically spend that budget.
You spend it on taking risks, on
Yeah.
launching features faster.
Yes. Outages become an expected part of innovation, and both teams are managing risk against that shared budget.
So shifting gears a bit to when things do break, SRE also really formalized incident response. I noticed a heavy focus on MTTR, mean time to repair. Why so much focus on repair speed?
Because in any complex system, failure is just. It's inevitable. You can't engineer away all risk. So your ability to recover quickly is the one factor you can reliably control.
That makes sense.
I mean, a system that fails a lot but recovers in a second is actually more available than one that fails once a year but takes 5 hours to fix.
And the sources gave us a really clear metric on how you lower that MTTR. It's all about preparation.
100%. The data shows that having pre-written playbooks, these step-by-step guides, gives you about a 3 times improvement in repair time compared to engineers just winging it under pressure.
It gives them a path to follow when everything is on fire.
Exactly. Acknowledge the alert, check the usual suspects like databases or recent changes, contain the blast radius, and so on.
And they also put limits on the alerts themselves to stop people from burning out.
Yes, this is huge. An SRE on call should get a maximum of just 2 actionable events in an 8 to 12-hour shift.
2. That's it.
That's it. Any more than that and you get alert fatigue. People just start ignoring the pages because it's all noise. You need your alerts to mean a human must intervene right now.
And after the incident, the learning is critical.
That's a post-mortem. And this is non-negotiable. It has to be a blame-free culture.
Right.
The second you start pointing fingers, people stop reporting the near misses, they hide information, and the learning stops cold. The focus has to be on fixing the system, not blaming the person.
So SRE was this massive leap forward. But now we're in the cloud-native world, and the sources suggest that even SREs are hitting a new kind of complexity wall.
This is what we're calling the modern SRE burden. We said earlier that coding is maybe 30% of an engineer's time. The really hard part, the other 70%, is running that code in production.
Because today's systems aren't just one big block of code.
Not even close. They're microservices spread across multiple clouds, managed by Kubernetes, talking through service meshes. The amount of knowledge you need to debug one single user request has just exploded.
You could have 10 different teams' code involved in one transaction.
Easily. And resolving an incident means trying to piece together fragmented clues from, logs, metrics, traces, runbooks, Slack chats, and all this tribal knowledge that lives in people's heads. The sheer volume is just too much for a human under pressure.
And this is where modern observability becomes the absolute bedrock for whatever comes next.
Yes. For any system, human or AI, to manage this complexity, it needs good data. And that starts with traces and spans.
Let's define those. A trace is the whole story.
A trace is the whole story. A user clicks buy, and the trace follows that single request through every microservice, every database call, every cache it hits, from start to finish.
And the spans are the individual chapters in that story.
Perfect analogy. Each span is one unit of work, the database query, the call to the payment gateway, and it has timing data and other contexts, like which user ID or deployment version was involved.
So you can see instantly where the bottleneck is. Which service took 800 milliseconds? But you still have this context problem. The human still has to connect all the dots.
And that's the killer. An investigation requires you to do all these things at once. Look at the trace timing, correlate that with a metrics graph over here, check the database connection pools, scan the auth logs, and compare all of that against recent deployments. No one person can be an expert in all those things and do it in under a minute.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the final shift we're talking about, from human-centric SRE to this AI-native era. And we need to be clear, this isn't just about fancier dashboards.
No, this is a fundamental paradigm shift. It's the difference between AI-assisted and AI-native.
Okay.
In the AI-assisted model, the engineer is still in charge. They use the same old tools, but maybe an LLM helps them write a log query faster. The workflow is still human-centric.
But in the AI-native model, that flips. The engineer talks to AI agents.
Exactly. They use natural language. Instead of digging through data, you just say, resolve this checkout failure, and the agents take over the whole multi-step investigation.
And this has to be a multi-agent system, right?
Right.
A single AI can't do it all.
Right. Single AIs fail here because of what academics call irreducible interdependence. You can't build one model that's an expert in 50 microservices and database deadlocks and infrastructure logs. It's just too broad.
So instead of one brain doing everything one step at a time,
You have a team of specialist agents working in parallel. A database agent, an infra agent, a trace agent. An alert fires, and they all test their own hypotheses at the same time, converging on the root cause way faster than any human could.
the sources call this new thing an AI production engineer. It's not just a tool, it's a proactive system.
It is. It starts by building its own understanding of the system, a dynamic knowledge graph mapping code, infra, tools, everything. That graph is its brain.
And when an alert fires, it doesn't wait for a human.
It responds autonomously. It creates what you could call just-in-time runbooks, tailored to that specific incident. It analyzes all the data metrics, logs, recent code changes in under a minute, and comes back with a high-confidence theory about the root cause.
It learns. It captures that tribal knowledge.
Yes, this is crucial. It watches how humans solve new problems and updates its own knowledge so runbooks never get stale. It's designed to take on that 70% of operational grunt work, the log queries, the evidence gathering, so humans can finally focus on creative work, on system design and architecture.
It's an incredible arc when you lay it all out. From manual sysadmins to rule-based SREs with their 50% caps and error budgets, and now to autonomous, knowledge-driven AI agents.
And the promise for you, the listener, is getting that 70% of your engineering time back. It's about having systems that give you consistent, evidence-backed, and fast investigations, which massively reduces the stress of being on call. We get to move from being firefighters to architects.
But this can't be a silver bullet.
Mhm.
Despite all these advances, what are the limitations we should be thinking about as we move into this AI-native world?
There are two big ones. First, the AI is only as good as the data it gets. If your underlying monitoring, your logs, your metrics, your traces is incomplete, the AI can't magically find the answer. Good monitoring gardening is still absolutely essential. Garbage in, garbage out.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second one?
The second is that by giving AI agents this much power and control over production, you're opening up an entirely new security attack vector. Absolutely. When these agents can execute changes and make decisions on their own, we have to think very, very carefully about the security, the auditability, and the safety controls around them. That is quickly becoming the next great challenge of the AI native era. It's a trade-off. Immense power for a fundamental shift in control.